Gentlemen, thank you for joining me this afternoon at the World Procurement Congress 2024. I'm really excited about this conversation today to get both of your insights, as sustainability is the hottest topic, maybe the biggest, most challenging topic that we have in front of us. So before we get started, why don't we do a little bit of introductions? Gordon and Thomas, do you mind saying hello and introducing yourselves?
Oh, I don't mind at all. Hello, and I think also to everybody who is on the screen watching us, thanks for listening in. Having an interest in sustainable procurement. I think that's really good, and it's also very important moving forward. So my name is Thomas Udesen. I'm the CPO of Bayer. I've been that for the last 11 years. Love it. Every day is full of great challenges and a chance to have a positive impact. So that's part of my life. I'm also the co-founder of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, which is an initiative we started 5 years ago that has sort of found lots of support in our global procurement community. We are 20,000 people now in pretty much all the countries. So that's nice. And my third hat, also around sustainability, is I'm on the board of the Together for Sustainability, which is the chemical industry initiative where we collaborate on how do we drive progress around sustainability performance in our supply chain.
Wonderful, thank you. Gordon?
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, well, I echo the first part around the sustainability and welcoming everybody. But I'm the Vice President of Research for Procurement External Workforce for SAP. I say a lot of the time to people, I think I've got the greatest job in the world. I've spent my entire working life working in procurement as a CPO, and now I get to research it and help try and shape the future of what procurement is by understanding what's going on. And you're absolutely right. Sustainability is a hot topic. It's been fascinating to see how it's risen, not necessarily just from procurement. I think it's always been there, but now I think the rest of the business recognizing the importance of it. And we have someone in common. Matthias Spott. If you remember Matthias, he used to work for Bayer. He talks about you a lot. Matthias is a friend of mine. And we used to work together at SAP. We say, hi Matthias.
Hi Matthias.
So there you go. So.
Hi Matthias.
And I think this is symptomatic of procurement. You know, everybody knows everybody. And I think that's just what makes, again, our function awesome. So keep that thought. It's an awesome function with big purpose.
We will talk about the importance of collaboration and ecosystems hopefully in this conversation. I'm sure it will come up. But let's kick off with the first question. So in some recent procurement leaders research, we found that sustainability appears as the #2 priority for procurement, both in the short term and the long term. So that didn't change, #2. So how can organizations effectively integrate sustainability, compliance specifically, into their procurement processes?
Yeah. So I think what is important is to recognize, first of all, in any organization that this is not a nice to have, and it needs to be positioned like that. So you're being very clear that these are requirements that are necessary to fulfill or exceed for you to do business with your company. I think the tone from the top, being very aware that this is something that's supported by leadership, it's an expectation. I think that is a message that also needs to be deployed across the organizations. As you say, the requirements are high today, but also long term, that's not going to reduce in any shape or form. I think as we are moving towards 2030 and it becomes clearer to the world that on many of the SDGs, we have big gaps still remaining. I think the society at large, regulators, will also wake up to those differences, and we will start to see that the expectations on companies, on our teams, on us, will increase quite dramatically on all the dimensions around both environment but also social. So the regulatory framework, we see that already in Europe, we've seen in Germany they've gone live, but the EU with the Green Deal is also coming forward. We're going to see that spread across the world. So, being prepared, able to roll up your sleeves and resource the effort appropriately is really critical for organizations to be that. And again, if your suppliers fail to progress, meet your minimum expectations or progress on your ambitions around decarbonization or show transparency around their human rights impact on the supply chain, then we are going to take business away from them. So, making sure this is not it's not a nice to have, it's not something we're talking about, we are going to make this happen.
Gordon, I'm going to switch to you for this next question. In that same research that was conducted, that the top 2 sustainability challenges were focused around compliance for carbon emission. What are you seeing from our customers in their strategies to achieve or overcome those challenges around carbon emissions?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting to see the data. So this was a study that The Economist did, and it was like 2,500 people responded to it. So it's a pretty big kind of procurement study, and it identified, as he said, compliance and carbon footprint, scope 1 and scope 2, not scope 3, because that was a separate thing. Again, it's interesting because you can look at it from an industry basis as well, and you can see the industries focused on scope 3 are basically the industries that don't have a scope 1 and scope 2. The industries that have a scope 1 and scope 2 are focused on scope 1 and scope 2 and less focused on scope 3, which is, it's an interesting finding. It's data, it is what it is, the interpretation is going to be interesting. Clearly, the compliance part of things, and that I think is one of the reasons why it's risen up the organizational agenda for procurement to do. So I don't think it's risen up the procurement agenda. I think it's always been high, but it's risen up the organizational agenda because of the compliance thing, the increasing amount of legislation that's going on. Who does compliance well? Well, procurement does compliance well. Who's actually going to be required to make sure all of these legislations are represented in the contracts properly? Well, that's procurement's role. So you can kind of see that there's this symbiotic relationship as compliance drives as being a primary driver of sustainability. Driving through this into contracts, I think, is one of the reasons, and one of the things that we're seeing from our customers. I think the other thing as well, certainly when you're thinking about carbon footprint, is the data collection around some of that. And again, coming from the suppliers, coming from your own usage, coming from the things that you directly control, and getting all of that information together. So that data management, that single source of truth, so you understand what you currently are and how you're going to reduce those carbon emissions. I mean, that's critical. Is how we're going to actually reduce and make an impact on this, and those measurable changes. So that's one of the things that we're seeing, is having this single source of truth from a data perspective, collecting the data from lots of different areas, and being able to understand what it means, and put a plan forward for how we're going to reduce and go forward.
Thomas, does that look different at all at Bayer?
No, I think exactly that's sort of the proven methodology. Get your ducks in a row, understand where you are, make sure it comes in with an integrity that is good enough. I think here we have to accept that this is also moving. Certainly when you talk about scope 3, even for many of your suppliers to articulate exactly what is a product carbon footprint is a challenge which is associated with lots of ambiguity. Establishing a standard was missing until quite recently, when in Together for Sustainability we created the standard for the chemical industry. So having the right common language, making sure that the data is good enough, and maybe start focusing on what actions can you make and what impact does that have, so that you start seeing which direction are you going. Then data will improve over time. As solutions providers are helping us to get that. But I think here we need to be cautious that perfection, may be at the enemy of progress, and we need to just move with whatever is good enough. Most important is we move and get stuff done.
It doesn't necessarily matter where you start, but start. Yeah.
And
we don't worry about the data being 100% perfect. It's never going to be 100% perfect. But you've got to start, you've got to collect some of that data together. And then, as you say, it's about, so what am I going to do with this? How am I going to make a change? And how am I going to measure that change and report on it? I think those are really critical to talk about it. Yeah.
Whether it's 90 or whether it's 95 progress, doesn't really matter. Yeah. What is important is you're doing the right thing. And here I think common sense is really good. And I just want to, because we are procurement practitioners, we all families, so we can also talk about some of our sort of weaknesses. I think we typically, or we have at least in the past, been guilty of sort of hiding behind the lack of data, not moving because we were hesitant, because we don't have all the data. I think we need to flip out of that. We just need to get going, and then the data will come as we go along.
So you alluded to a challenge, a common challenge that we hide behind potentially, but what are other challenges to overcoming measuring progress in sustainability? So if we have the data or if we don't have the data, what are other challenges you see in making progress?
Well, I think as your data advances, you will also see that at times there are certain trade-offs that needs to be considered. One of the classics that we hear also in our procurement community is, but if you want to reduce carbon, or if you want to transition towards a bio-based solution instead of fossil fuel, it's going to cost some money. We need to be able to put a value of the benefit we see with decarbonization or with a protection of biodiversity or whichever dimension. And in many companies, that value hasn't been established, or even entertaining a conversation that you have made a sort of objective around decarbonization and you have a financial objective. These two things need to go hand in hand. In some organizations, the maturity of conversation is really pretty low. So establishing a value, being prepared to then also make those trade-offs, translating that to your customer base. Whatever we do should, in a way, be appreciated by your customers. If you're not telling them, how would they be able to, in a way, make better choices themselves? So that standard around product carbon footprinting, making sure they understand what you do, why you do it, they can compare you against your competition. I think those are practical challenges that are still out there. But they will be solved, I think, in the next couple of years, because CPOs, procurement organizations, at our customer level or our customer's customer level will start asking those questions. So that's, in a way, that's good.
And I think it's also understanding price, cost, and value. So you mentioned that there's, and I think it's an interesting point. People, there's an assumption that people say, oh, well, if I'm buying the sustainable one, it's going to cost us more. Not necessarily.
No, often not.
Yeah, often it's the same or different. But also, even if the price is more, the total cost might be lower. Yeah. So we need to understand the difference between the price and the cost. A friend of mine ran engineering for an automotive company, and he used to rail at procurement buying the cheap products in there, because he said, actually, when you think about it, whilst it might be 3 times cheaper, it takes me 5 times longer to sort through to fit the part. Yes. So the cost is more through buying the cheaper one. Yeah. They wanted to get the better quality, the more sustainable thing that was actually easier to fit. So understanding the price and the cost, then the value piece. Yeah. Even if the price does go up, even if the overall cost isn't negated by it, is that increased value? And this is where I think one of the things that I really want procurement to start thinking about doing is elevating out from just looking at costs and understand total business value. It might actually increase sales. If you're in a consumer thing and your consumers are wanting that, it might increase sales. We need to factor in the totality of price, cost, and value.
And if I can just add on that, because it's such an exciting topic, the reality is if we don't establish that in the marketplace, between demand and supply, the regulators, particularly as we move towards 2030, they're going to start doing it for us, right? So the CBAM is coming in there. So if you don't get it there, you'll get duties, and so it in a way it's an investment. It's a scenario where there is probably an advantage of being a first mover, because we will run into scarcity of supply of more sustainable solutions. So the ones who get it now, are more likely to be successful also when the sort of temperature goes up.
And I think the targets then that get set need to be realistic as well, because if you take like the electric vehicles, everyone's starting to move their targets further out, because it wasn't actually sustainable to try and hit those targets in the first place, because you had to increase the supply of lithium by like 2,300% to get it's just not possible. So I do see this kind of realignment that's going on to actually have sustainable strategies.
So I'm going to ask a question to both of you, and which either of you want to answer first, or think you have the better answer here, we'll see. So,
I think you're going to go first.
No.
But the confidence level of procurement delivering in a bigger way on sustainability initiatives or ESG initiatives, we'll broaden that. Like that confidence has really gone up in the past year. Why do you think that is?
So the study that you're referencing is the Economist one. If you looked at the data from 2023, it was the confidence in the rest of the C-suite in procurement delivering organizational ESG goals, and it was 48%. In this year's data, it's 68%, which when I went to school is a 20% increase in confidence levels. Why do I think it is? It's because I think procurement's delivered. I think this is what it is. I think procurement has started to deliver on certain things, especially around the compliance side of things. And I think our hope is that we go beyond the compliance. But whilst compliance is a driver, this is where kind of procurement lives and breathes a lot of its time. So I think that's one of the reasons why I've seen that confidence factor go up. And as that confidence factor goes up, that's risen the sustainability priority again, not from the rest of the, not from procurement, but the rest of the business in wanting procurement to get involved, because we have proven that we can deliver. And as a result, once you've proven, you've created that trust that those things can be delivered. I think that's going on. I think that's going to carry on going. I think the final part is, I just think procurement's become better aligned with the business over the last couple of years. It's as reporting lines change. So one of the things we've seen in this is that reporting lines have changed away from being from finance and more to operations. When operations gets involved, it's a much broader conversation than being solely focused on a number. It's more focused on risk, it's more focused on sustainability, and sustainability and risk go very much hand in hand, I think. So I think those are the reasons why those confidence levels are rising. I think it's a mixture of the reporting lines, the fact that we're delivering, the fact that compliance is a driver. I think all of those things together have helped increase procurement's visibility.
Yeah.
And this is where I'm going to disagree with you for the first time. I promised that I would disagree. So I don't think it matters whether you're reporting to the CFO or to the CSCO or whoever. I report to a CFO and he's amazing. And he gives our organization the full confidence to also move along on topics around decarbonization. So I would say everything you've said, yes, but I think procurement is, in a way, agnostic to reporting lines if we are smart enough. And I think that's something that we need to maintain.
My old manager used to say to me, doesn't matter where you report to, as long as you can influence and people listen to you.
Yes, and I think that's exactly what the fact that the organization looks at us and they have built up their confidence with 20%, that's amazing in 1 year,
isn't it?
Is that we have delivered on those expectations and they've seen that the regulatory environment is coming up and everybody is still okay. We are reporting what we need to report. I think also we've become much better in having honest conversations that a lot of this stuff is not easy. There are constraints and we are not saying, yes, sir, we're going to do this, and then, we go back and we underperform. We have honest conversations up front. So I think that's why the world looks at us and say we should be confident. Around procurement within, maybe the data didn't talk about that, but I do think the conference here is one sort of evidence point, but also I mentioned a bit earlier today, the fact that we have with Sustainable Procurement Pledge or other initiatives, we have so many volunteers, practitioners, who is prepared for free in their volunteer time to share knowledge so that everybody knows how do we get stuff done. There is enough knowledge, there's enough solutions out there. There is, unfortunately, an asymmetry of information. So, person A knows it, person B needs it. We have found mechanisms through our collaboration to make this knowledge available. And I think that's just, again, an accelerator for impact. So, yeah.
I like the debate. I appreciate it. So, Thomas, last question. When you think about Bayer's sustainability strategy, what is your biggest opportunity?
So if I look at the supply chain and our sort of priorities when it comes to our suppliers, our inbound, it's definitely around decarbonization, it's around human rights and supplier diversity. I would say those are, for the inbound, the biggest areas where we have an impact and where we can positively sort of advance the world. As a company, being also in agriculture, we have a huge impact when it comes to water, right? And we have a huge impact when it comes to topics like, child labor, etc. So we, of course, spending a lot of time on the sales side on how do we have regenerative farming, how do we find ways of capturing carbon with our new seeds, and our team is working a lot with our rest of our business, with the researchers, to make sure that we get innovation to address sort of water and labor challenges, but more from a business out perspective.
I'm looking forward to next year asking you how you made progress on those and how those achieved. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. Enjoy the Congress.
Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Thanks.